Hello everybody, it's me again. It's again wonderful to see you again in this rainy Taizé. I'm afraid we had very nice weather these last days, but today not so much. I'm sorry about that. So we continue. Like every day, shortly I'll try to introduce the texts for today. And the text, like I said yesterday, will come from St. Mark's Gospel. And today it's also quite a famous text. It's the one about the multiplication of the bread. They didn't have enough to eat, they had a little, and Jesus multiplied it, and all of a sudden everybody had enough to eat. It is a very important text, and you can see this because, like I said yesterday, there are 4 different Gospels, 4 people telling their version of the life in Jesus, and they all include this. A lot of them you find, for example, in one Gospel but not in the other, or in 3 but not in one. Well, you understand the idea. But this story you will find in all the Gospels, and in some of the Gospels even twice. So this shows that it was an important moment. I think that it was, in a way, a founding moment for this community. Of course, after the death and resurrection, these friends of Jesus, those who trusted in Jesus, they continued. Some of them were living together, they were praying together, and they were sharing this good news with other people. And this continued all the way to us today. And then in the beginning they were thinking, but when did it start? When did this idea that we are a group around Jesus, that we are a community, started? Perhaps it was this moment that we were with Jesus in the desert. That we were there alone and He took care of us. He gave us something to eat. Now, of course, what is happening here, most of us never experienced this in real life. If there is nothing to eat, there is nothing to eat. You can go out and buy something, but you cannot just say, okay, I have 1 slice of bread, I'll just multiply it and then I have enough for everybody. So these moments, which occur quite often in the Bible, when Jesus is doing a miracle, they're difficult for us today, because I think, at least I, don't have the same experience. I don't live in a world where this kind of miracles happen every day. So one thing to keep in mind is perhaps that for Jesus, a miracle is always a sign. He's not just doing a magic trick to impress people, to show how powerful He is, but through this, He's trying to show something, and that's what we'll see today. It's not about the thing that is spectacular as such. It is much more about what Jesus is showing through this. So let's go back to the beginning of the text, because this, I think, it's already from a very human point of view, very beautiful. Jesus was working a lot, and His disciples were working a lot, because there was so much to do. So many people who needed hope, who needed healing. So they were going from place to place. They often didn't spend a long time somewhere. And also there was little time in a way. Jesus, what we call His public ministry, so all these moments that we read about, all His teaching, all His miracles, etc., it was only in a couple of years, in a very short time. But even in spite of this, in spite of the urgency, Jesus understands, but both for me personal, it is important to have time alone with my Father, with God, otherwise it doesn't make sense anymore what I'm doing, it becomes empty. But also, as a group, we need rest. So He's inviting His disciples, the apostles, to this deserted place to be alone for a moment, far away from everybody. But it doesn't work. Here again you see this sense of urgency that we find in St. Mark. There's something too important going on, so even if they run away, people will just run even faster behind them. And then when this point comes, Jesus sees how much they need him, they need hope, they need life, and Jesus does not turn away from them. And I think both attitudes in our life are very important. There are moments when we have worked a lot, when we have done a lot of things, or for other reasons, we really need rest, and that's very important. But there are other moments as well that people need us. And even though we're a bit tired, perhaps we have done already a lot, we should be there for them. So then we find two things with a very symbolic meaning within the biblical tradition. One I talked already about yesterday. Again, they are in a wilderness in the desert. And like I said yesterday, the desert, it's both a very dangerous place because we don't know if there will be enough to eat. We don't know if there's enough to drink. There might be wild animals, and we will not have the protection that we would have within the civilized world, within a city. But at the same time, since we're so vulnerable, we also more easily learn to trust God. Or we're perhaps, since they're not all these inputs from our daily life, we're more susceptible to what God is trying to say to us. There's not all this noise, and we understand a bit better what he's trying to say to us. And then there is the symbolism of the shepherd. Mark says he saw a great crowd, and Jesus had compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. And the shepherd is the symbol of the shepherd. It's important in the Bible because it's like often within the Bible it's very double. Shepherds were often quite poor. They were living outside, once again, the civilized world. They were seen as quite socially, they had a very low position. But at the same time, for example, King David, before becoming a king, was a shepherd. And God himself often used this image to describe him as a shepherd. As a shepherd cares for the sheep, so I will care for you. I will protect you. I will make sure that no harm will come to you. So here we see these two things together. Both the desert, these people learning to trust God, and God through Jesus being a true shepherd, taking care of his flock, taking care of his people. But then it's getting late. It's getting late, and there is nothing to eat. A very practical problem. And first of all, Jesus wants his disciples to find a solution. He says to them, but you give them something to eat. You have been such a long time with me. You should understand by now that being my disciple means that the impossible can become possible. That something new can always exist. But they don't know what to do. So Jesus asked him, but don't you have anything? But yes, they do have something. 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. And this is important as well, because as we know, now Jesus is going to multiply this. And well, it's already such a big miracle. I suppose Jesus could have done it as well, starting from scratch, having nothing at all. But Jesus chooses not to act this way. To start something new, but once again with what is already there. With what exists, and this is also the work that Jesus is doing within us. He is starting something new, but from what exists already. We don't have to completely get rid of everything that we are. God accepts us as we are, and with that he starts something new. Another important detail within this text is that so Jesus is multiplying it. There's a lot to eat, and then he's giving it to his disciples, and the disciples give it to the people. It does not mean that Jesus doesn't want to get close to the people, that he's afraid for a virus or something like that and he doesn't want to approach them. Not at all. But once again we see this thing that Jesus and God in general chooses to work through people. Here there's something beautiful to distribute to the people, something to eat, something to nourish them. And he says to his disciples, but you have to give it to them. I asked you first to do something you couldn't. That's okay. I helped you. But now I trust you. I give you this responsibility to bring this to the people. And then the last detail that I want to speak about, it's very clear as well. There are 12 baskets of food left over. Immediately the number 12, if you know a little bit about the Bible, you think that the people of God, there were 12 tribes, 12 groups within this. And having 12 baskets left over, it's symbolically it means, but this was enough for these people already, with many who were there physically with Jesus. But since there's left over 12 baskets, this is enough for everybody, for every group within society. This is not just some good news for a few, for my own group, for people who are like me, or people who I like. This is something that is for everybody. Nobody is excluded. So like I said, after Jesus' death and resurrection, this group of friends of Jesus, those who trusted him, they continued. And through this text, they remembered some important things that are also important for us to remember. That even if we're in these kind of deserted places where nothing seems to happen, where nothing seems to grow, we can trust that God is among us. And we can trust that God is this good shepherd who will give us what we truly need. Not always what we want, but always what we truly need. And that this is something not just for me, not just for a few, but this is for everybody. And when God gives, he doesn't just give a little bit, he gives more than enough. So much even that we can share with all the people around us. Thank you very much. Have a very nice day and see you tomorrow.